Yes, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We've deviated a little bit from our Bitcoin heavy episodes of late, and we're venturing out into the other areas in the world. And I mean, yesterday's conversation was really interesting. It was linked in so far as Solana centric, and I think I think Marco covered a lot of really interesting topics that we hadn't perhaps touched on. He also, I mean, he gave us a lot of clips. I was thinking about it after the show. There was, I mean, there was maybe 3 hot takes in 7 seconds that I think we need to pull out and engagement farm on. But yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this conversation again. You've got a new background, which is looking very fresh indeed. Artwork and a glowing Bitcoin sign. I've asked you, but I've already forgotten. So this isn't a promotional piece, I promise. Who's the artist again behind that work?
All right, so yeah, we've got Cypherpunk now is the artist of that piece, and just a big shout out to Martin for sponsoring that for my studio. It's a really great piece. He's really well known in the industry. He's been around for more than 10 years, and I just really love the pop art kind of punk rock style of the piece. And my wife and I actually saw the print while we were at Bitcoin Amsterdam when we did the Winklevoss interview. And she said, man, you should reach out to them and see if they're willing to, give you a print or something like that. So yeah, big shout out to Cypherpunk Now. You can find his website, Cypherpunk Now. Go and check him out. If there's some stuff you like, he also sent me a shirt. So he does some merch as well, but really cool. And then I also got the Bitcoin neon sign from Etsy, actually, from an individual that's just doing loads of neon signage. So we'll probably have to get a CoinTelegraph sign done as well. But everyone knows I'm a big Bitcoin maxi, so I had to start with the Bitcoin neon sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be done. I mean, behind me, people think that's a CoinTelegraph logo. It isn't. It's a Lightning logo. And depending on who's asking me what it is, I give a different answer. Sometimes I say it's the Lightning Network. Sometimes I say it's CoinTelegraph. Sometimes I just say it's a Lightning bolt. And that I tell you what, talking about Etsy stores, that ticker behind me, I got that off a random Etsy store. I'm pretty sure it's a guy just making them, just ordering like the units bulk and then just turning them into crypto units with very basic software. And
Yeah,
so it broke after a year. Like I'd had it a year and it wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi anymore. And I emailed him and just said, look, these things happen. Is there anything you can do? And he just shipped me a brand new unit. He was like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll just send it.
man.
I mean, his profit margins must be off the chart to be doing that. But still, like Etsy's a good place for this sort of stuff. But it's cool. Your background's looking good. Also, I like the paint color, which I know a lot of thought went into.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, we nearly painted it something else, and I think our CEO would have wrung my neck if she'd seen that color that we were going to go with first. But this actually does really well, and I think it's very similar to the base color of CoinTelegraph's kind of branding. So it was just a happy coincidence as well. But yeah, this is the new studio. I hope everyone likes it. It's gonna get bigger and better as we go along, but already a massive improvement, and I'm smiling with a very broad smile today. But anyway, we've talked enough. We've done enough housekeeping, and let's chat to Ryne. So we've got Ryan Saxe here, who's the CEO of Eco. Ryne, I'm going to ask you to do the honors here and just give us a brief intro of yourself, how long you've been in the industry, and maybe just a TLDR of Eco and what you guys do.
Yeah, sure thing. First, I'm not bringing anything to the background game here. But what I love about this, I could be anywhere in the world. No one has any idea. You can't trace the plain white. Actually, it's a little early on my end this morning, so I'm sort of shunned to a different corner from my normal setup. And so this is what we get. Sorry, I'm not bringing something more interesting. We'll focus on the content, not on the background. And so, yeah, I'm Ryne, CEO of Eco. And Eco, basically, simply put, we're a protocol that enables programmable real-time stablecoin movement on chain. We can talk about how we do that, why we think that's important. We have plenty of time. And then you asked how long have I been in the industry? I've been in the industry as an enthusiast, I would say about 10 years, and then building Eco in some shape or form for about 7. And so Eco has sort of a bit more history than some people would realize. We were sort of too soon to the stablecoin use case, and fortunately kind of found our way to the day when stablecoins ultimately took off. And so we've been building for stablecoins actually since 2017. That meant something very different back then than it really means today. And it's been really interesting to see that curve finally hit. And we've been waiting on it for a long time. So that's what we do, though. Our thesis is basically, we got a couple of Bitcoin maxis here. I want everybody to plunge into the deep end of the Bitcoin pool. Also, but I learned sometime around 2018, 2019 that everybody was not going to do that as quickly as I wanted them to in the world, and that making stablecoins super seamless, super accessible is probably the right user journey for a lot of people to ultimately arrive at Bitcoin or some other DeFi. So that's why we care. That's why we care about stablecoins. They're just better for money movement, and ultimately, the more accessible we're making stablecoins, the easier we're making it for people to get on chain. And that's kind of driven us through thick and thin since we first started.
It's funny. So we plug Bitcoin a fair amount, and what's interesting is when we have people that are building in other ecosystems where it feels as if the Bitcoin maxis will just instantly load anyone that's not in Bitcoin only. But the people we bring on that are building in Solana, building in Ethereum, are also massive Bitcoiners. They're always big Bitcoiners who are just doing something else. And I think there's something to tease out of that one day, a conversation. However, my question to you is more to do with, you mentioned how early really eco started. And I think you said you started looking at working in stablecoins in 2017. Is that when you said?
Late 2017. We started eco formally in 2018. Yeah.
Okay, so that's when I got into the industry. That's when Gareth got into the industry. Back then, I don't have a clear memory of what I thought of stablecoins back then, which is indicative in itself of where stablecoins were at. I mean, nobody in crypto now doesn't know what stablecoins are or what they do. It's the base layer of the whole industry. I love when people make correct calls years in advance. Did you imagine stablecoins reaching where they are today? Did you really predict that in 7 years this is where we'd be? Or, I mean, what prompted you to pursue stablecoins at that point?
Yeah, we did. We were not as correct as it seems. I can talk about why. One reason is you asked me, did we predict that stablecoins would be here in 7 years? No, we actually predicted that stablecoins would be here 4 years ago, and that was a problem. So we had to find our way through that waiting game. But yeah, for us, we really did believe in this use case being enormous, orders of magnitude bigger than it is even today. And I think the reason for that is founding team of Eco, we all had sort of some deeper awareness of the world of payments before e-commerce, card processing, bank compliance, et cetera. And we all had pretty kind of hands-on awareness about where that didn't work very well. So when we looked at crypto and at this kind of nebulous concept then of a stable coin, we're just like, that's just better money movement. It's inevitable. As soon as people start taking that up, existing payment networks can't really compete unless they do too. And that was just like very pragmatic kind of thing. One of my co-founders has this great phrase. It's like head in the clouds, feet on the ground. You got to have both at the same time to build a great product, especially in crypto. And so the head in the clouds dream is you want to get people to an alternative currency, Bitcoin or something else. You want to bring their money on chain and then take them further. The feet on the ground acknowledgement is that starts with dollars, probably not Bitcoin for a lot of people, even though it was different for us here in this chat. And I think it took us a couple of years to figure that out. And stablecoins were still a bet. The I think thesis about crypto just being better money movement and that ultimately impacting people's payments and wallets was correct. But there was a lot that was wrong back then about the assumptions of what a stablecoin would look like, as you probably remember. There's this whole kind of V1, Gen 1 phase of algo stablecoins that were all very experimental because we were all obsessed with Ethereum programmability at the time. And we thought, can you just program a stablecoin into existence in a certain way? And that didn't work very well, but the experimentation was probably healthy for the most part. And then you just kind of had to like mature and get a little more pragmatic with how you thought about the technology and the use case over a couple of years that followed.
I think my question to follow on from that then is, how has the technology changed in the last sort of 7-8 years?
I don't think it's the technology. Well, it is the technology. I mean, obviously Ethereum is scalable, and that's sort of like the original home of stablecoins. We thought that Ethereum was going to scale as a chain much faster. We all did in 2018, 2019 than what we've kind of waited out. And so that's just kind of I think the table stakes answer is just Ethereum's more scalable, more buildable, and then you have alternatives like Solana, et cetera, that have come along and made money movement faster. Simple as that. I don't think that stablecoin, much has changed about stablecoins beyond everyone kind of aligning on safer models, and kind of getting away from the algos. I think it's been much more about kind of how the underlying L1s have matured and how interoperability among them is now maturing as well, and that just makes stablecoins more useful across chains. And that's a lot of what I think we had to wait out probably twice as long as we all assumed back in the day, so to speak. Yeah.
Ryan, your team, shared details of your expansion sort of into the Solana ecosystem. Can you talk a little bit more about why that matters and the sheer amount of liquidity that exists in the Solana ecosystem today, and bringing that into the broader stablecoin environment?
Yes, I'm so excited about this. We've had this in the chamber for like 6 months, and we don't YOLO new chain launches. So just to kind of like a bit about our thesis before I hit on Solana. If you look at the market today, and universe expands, universe contracts, I think this is going to stay roughly the same as far as what we care about. There's like fewer than 20 chains and fewer than 10 stablecoin assets that are going to do 99.9% of the settlement volume, and that's kind of where we sit. Okay, so whatever use cases round trip to stablecoins, whatever cross-chain use cases need to go through a stablecoin to route in between, we kind of like want to sit in that part of the market, the primary wholesale market for stablecoins, you might call it, between the major assets and chains, which is obviously why we need to get to Solana. So Eco is a relatively kind of chain neutral technology. We want to sort of aggregate stablecoin liquidity wherever it's most in demand and help it flow. And so Solana has been inevitable, right? I think if you look at growth in stablecoin volume and stablecoin TVL, Solana's 4 or 5x since the start of the year. It's just faster money movement, right? And its developer ecosystem has matured quite a bit. So we've had this in plans since the spring. And if you think about sort of like the stablecoin economy, there's like continents, and Ethereum is its own enormous continent, the equivalent of the US economy for DeFi and stablecoins. But Solana has become an extremely important continent as well. And we try to bridge those continents and make money movement programmable sort of among them. So we're super stoked about Solana. I said earlier, we don't rush chain launches. We usually want to start working with a couple projects kind of in the background to help kind of seed that ecosystem and our use cases in that ecosystem, and refine our tools for those builders, which, as you know, on Solana's VM environment are going to be different than they are for Ethereum builders. And so we've been doing a lot of that in the background for the last 6 months, and only now is it public that we support Solana, but it's something we've been planning toward all year. So I'm really excited about it, and it's total coincidence. It's breakpoint week, to be honest with you. Total
works well.
Yeah.
Is your team on the ground in Abu Dhabi then? Yes, no.
Surprisingly, no. We had several people at Dev Connect, and we just have a lot of end of year sort of sprint goals to hit. And so, and we have a couple kind of like Solana project relationships we're already working with. So and we're going to try to grow those rather intentionally. So I'd really like to be there. It's a great event. It's pretty loud though. And so as far as just like everybody's announcing something. And so we want to get in front of it with this announcement, keep building through the end of the year, and grow with the partners we do have in the Solana ecosystem. It's kind of in private right now, but hopefully kind of go public in Q1. And so we just felt like our feet were pretty well set on this announcement. So we kind of held back and kept the travel schedule sane for a couple weeks until we can get some stuff done. Yeah.
Everyone needs that. I know that more than most. Like I deliberately chose not to, travel the rest of the year, and there were some big conferences to go to, and it's okay. There'll be plenty more next year. My next question is, obviously, I read the Solana news, and it just got me thinking about the amount of different interoperability protocols that are out there. We recently had Ilya Polasukin, who's one of the co-founders of Near Protocol, on the show, and we had a long conversation about Near Intents and how helpful that kind of infrastructure is to just abstract the complexity away of dealing with different tokens and just letting protocols and systems go and do the hard work in the background. And I can just say I want to take my Bitcoin and I want Solana, or I want to take my Bitcoin and I only want to hold stable coins now, and infrastructure in the background makes that happen. You made mention that you guys were perhaps probably a bit early on the entire sort of stablecoin movement, which it's not the first time I've heard a story like that in the industry. It happens. But at this stage, how hard is it to sort of break in and tell other people like, hey, we're here, we're doing this, and this piece of software or this service matters just as much as what Layer 0 is doing or what Near Protocol are doing?
I mean, that's a great question. I think it's always hard. You're a startup trying to build, the startup stories you hear about are those that kind of like found accidental product market fit as fast as they could possibly hang on. And those are the books we all read. But it's not that way for most of us that are building. You iterate constantly kind of within your mission and conviction, and you try to find your way there. That's always hard. I will say though, it has been a lot easier over the last 12 months than some people would think. And the reason is we've been able to cut through the noise with stablecoin focus. So we have some Lindy there. We understand the use case probably as well as anyone in the industry, like full stack. We built at the app layer, we built at the bare metal liquidity layer, and everywhere in between, for stables. And so in our case, that opinionation I think has benefited us quite a bit. We can speak to the use case well. We can support builders in the use case really, really well. We can squeeze a ton of performance out of our system, only caring for the stablecoin use case. And it also just helps us kind of position a little bit differently. And it helps us work with the existing incumbents. To be honest with you, our system is composable with various interop protocols, and because the stablecoin use case is kind of just like adjacent or a little bit different, and pretty generally applicable and pretty neutral. If we don't pick winners ourselves. And so it's been maybe I don't want to say it's been sort of like a linear pull. We've really had to iterate quite a bit over the last year and a half, as we sensed we were kind of right place, right time with our current tech. But that sort of very use case specific positioning, when that use case started to become like really the meta, has benefited us all year, and it's helped us cut through. But you're still just, you're still sort of building and fighting for every next distribution opportunity that's really a needle mover and really significant. And I don't want to take away from the challenge of doing that once you get in the arena. But I do think our positioning benefits us quite a bit. It's kind of a two-sided answer, but there's a dose of both in it, as I just kind of retrospect on this year.
Yeah, Ryan, I want to. This would be a fairly difficult question, but I think it's a really interesting angle. So
bring it.
You have your coffee. That's it. We've given you a few.
I'm gonna get more. I'm gonna get more right now. That's the way.
It's not really that hard a question. Earlier this year, we had Avery Ching of Aptos on the show. Excuse me. And we were talking about his journey. So he was one of the key players in Meta's Libra. Yep. And I had an absolute epiphany while he was talking during that show that Libra was seen as this laughable disaster from the outside, particularly outside of crypto. People just thought it was so funny that Meta would try this big global digital currency play and it just collapsed in on itself, and they were so stupid to have done it. But as Avery explained what they did and how they did it, I realized that if you're too early, it looks identical to being wrong. And they weren't wrong. They were just too early. But they did this within Eco's lifespan. How did you avoid that same fate? Was it just that you were, with all due respect, lower profile than Meta? Or do you think perhaps you approached it slightly differently?
Element of both in this one too. So, definitely lower profile. I think that Libra was more mature as a design and a thesis than a lot of people realize. Even more mature as technology than a lot of people realize. There are several prominent crypto projects that spun out with that tech for different use cases, right? The Move ecosystem being one of them. So they had really invested quite a bit, I think, in intentionally building that team. I think the hot take is they got one thing very wrong publicly, which is they came out shouting new money. And it's very, very difficult in the environment of that time for a company like Facebook, which already struggled with, I think, a lot of public trust issues in that window, to come out and say, well, not only do we have like all your data, but now we're going for your money too. And that was during an era where Zuck was getting hauled to Congress once a year, and it was just a horrible misread, in my opinion. And they got a lot of other stuff right, but it was DOA when they came out with that tone. And we didn't have a high enough profile to have that risk. But it was interesting. What was really interesting about that to us is we used to have a lot of internal debates about positioning. And for us, new money was off limits. You don't say it. People don't want it. People want it, but they don't know it. And so you got to lead them there, like something through other money pain points. And to us, that was very clear. And I think that's what that was a self rug after a lot of very legitimate hard work. Now there's we had one success along the way that really kind of buoyed us and was a trampoline to survival. It was an element of both being right and wrong ultimately, but some people are aware, maybe in your listening base, we built a consumer app in the US from 2020 to 2023. It was literally, to my knowledge, the first full-featured stablecoin neobank. In full bank replacement, custodial USDC, obviously designed to then bridge people gracefully to non-custodial USDC and other opportunities. And that product was a hit. It made a splash. It had really, really strong product market fit for about 2 years. And so that was an element of product market fit along the way that probably without it, I don't think we survived. With it, we gained a lot of momentum. We gained a lot of awareness. We raised more capital. But that's even a little bit of Pyrrhic victory, so to speak, because we built that product regulated, and then the regulatory environment completely turned against crypto, as you guys know, by 2023, and it killed that product. And so even then, you could say we were wrong for being too soon, but the use case was emerging as being a pretty clear one. And yeah, it's not a hard question at all. I appreciate you asking it, but maybe that's my Libra hot take, and then maybe that's what distinguished us along the way. We had that one hit, the kind of like that one dose of product market fit for a couple of years. It was pretty strong for us, and led us to the other side, even though it involved a rather painful product wind down in that season.
I have a follow-up question from a completely different angle. I wish I could have asked this at a different time, because right now things are quite good for the industry. But so I started a company with my friend in late 2017, early 2018. The crypto market absolutely tanked, basically, as we were starting it. We then had to go through the same sort of problem when FTX collapsed and Terra Luna. And we had, I mean, we were nowhere near the sort of size that Eco is, but we had employees that relied on us, and there was a lot of pressure and stuff. And I remember so many conversations where I would think, I think it's healthy to always ask the question, am I wrong? Like, this vision I have, am I wrong? I think it's healthy to always ask that. But I think there's a benefit to some degree of arrogance about where you think you're going, and a sort of single track mindedness that sometimes I lacked. And you saw Libra collapse under extreme regulatory scrutiny. The banks didn't seem to like it much either, obviously. I remember several things in Congress about it threatening the US dollar and stuff, which ironically is now seen to be completely the opposite situation, in which it could save the US dollar as the global reserve currency. But anyway, there's been all these times where it seems like you're right up against the wall, and you've got to have the resolve to say to the people that have bet on you, to the people that work for you, to the people that believe in you, oh, no. The vision is still correct. We will get through this. How do you do that? Have you wavered at all, or have you? Because it seems like under Biden administration, Operation Choke Point 2.0 rattled most people. How, I mean, from a CEO perspective, how do you keep the train on the track?
Yeah, that's another amazing question. Another thing I would, the crazy thing about being a founder sometimes is you don't know, right? Like you read startup success stories where a founder was just like hell bent on this vision of the world and just survived.
Yeah.
Maybe Nvidia's kind of like one type of that, that type of story. To some extent, it's an oversimplification. They got a lot of history. And then you read other stories about, oh, the founder just like burnt down their entire original mission when they found this kernel of a thing and they went for it. And Slack is a great example there. And then they became world beaters. And there's just competing. Pivot aggressively, stick to your conviction. And as a founder, you're just, especially in an insane market like crypto, you're ping-ponging sometimes in your less stable moments between those two things. So it's a question I empathize with so much. All I can answer is kind of, I think, why is within our own experience. One thing I can say is, yeah, we did scrap part of the original vision, but we didn't scrap the original mission to the extent those are different. And the mission has always been kind of like a better money mission, like build products that make money work better for people. That's it. That's the feet on the ground statement. Now, the head in the clouds vision we started with is just like, was very much kind of like even if we didn't use the words, was it like a new money vision, right? I was all in on Bitcoin and like the alternative currencies. And we wanted to take people there. And I think that it was pretty clear by 2020, 2021 that all of us degens were a little too optimistic about that state of the world and that state of crypto taking over that quickly. And so we had to back it off a little bit. Along the way, the mission for us has stayed consistent, and we have pivoted the product within that pursuit a couple of times. But that's been pretty meaningful. I think if we would have switched up the mission, then it would have essentially been kind of a repositioning, a refounding. You would have lost a lot of your best people that were in it to chase that mission early on that otherwise stayed through thick and thin. And so for me, that consistency, that mission consistency has been really, really important, even though we've changed the product twice. There was never a question when we changed the product how it connected to still bringing people into like a better money experience. And so I think that nexus and that consistency has been really important for us along the way. But to be like totally founder vulnerable, I waffle on this, from time to time. I do. It's like I'm a stubborn person, and that can be a pitfall, right? It can be a pitfall in a number of ways. It can lead me to make decisions too slowly. It can lead you to hang on to things for too long, or it can be a superpower. When you see something that is just like so obvious and like you are like hell bent on making it real, and you stick it out. And in some seasons, the difficulty can be like, am I, is my conviction a strength, or is it a weakness, a vulnerability, a risk for the company? And where it's been a risk, I've probably gotten lucky. Where it's been a strength, that's carried us through. The best I can figure out is to surround yourself with other founders who know you well, and try to get a read on that when you don't know yourself and you need sort of an armchair psychologist.
Yeah, look, I think most people that have been in this industry for a long time know how difficult that is. And to be fair, not many people have sat in the founder seat. And Rob is one of those people that has been in the founder seat and has built a couple of, helped build a couple of different companies and seen, relative success and also some really challenging times. And you can only really empathize when you've been through that. But I mean, to pivot the conversation a little bit, I think you must be in a very optimistic place, just given how much has changed in the United States in the last 18 months. The Genius Act is sort of on the cusp of coming to fruition. That's very positive for the entire stablecoin landscape in general. And also, I guess, stablecoins and the infrastructure that we use have become so much more advanced now. We've got a few major incumbents, USDC, Tether, Circle, and a handful of other players that dominate the industry, but really Tether dominate the industry. You can use USDT across, I think it's more than 10 chains, 12 blockchains, if I stand to be corrected, but it's a lot, right? Like a lot of different blockchains, but there's still some complexity involved. I mean, every now and then, if I'm playing around with different wallets and different chains, I get to a point where I get to a hiccup and I'm like, man, this user experience kind of sucks. And then it reminds me that we're still kind of in a nascent like part of the industry. But just given the landscape in the United States, all the stuff that you've gone through, the amount of times you've had to pivot, you must be pretty optimistic about where Eco sits right now and the opportunities to be a major facilitator of liquidity and transactions across different chains for the variety of big stablecoins we have. And just considering, I mean, like stablecoins are going to be the future of finance. I think everyone can see it.
Yeah. I'm so optimistic. It feels like we're building the right thing at the right time. It hasn't felt that way it didn't feel that way up until this year for the prior couple. Market's pulling it out of us now, which is always a great feeling. It really focuses your roadmap quite a bit. So yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic. And for stablecoins writ large, I'm on the record elsewhere as saying it's just like we're like 1 or 2% into this game. Everyone's impressed because there's $300 billion in market cap, whatever it is. It's like that drop in the bucket. 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're well into the trillions, and stablecoins are eating dollarized markets around the world. We're impressed right now because stablecoins seem to be becoming, at least in some data sets, increasingly competitive with card settlement volume. And okay, that's just like one big milestone along the way. And so I'm really, really like, how often in your career do you have an opportunity to build in a constantly monotonically increasing market?
Not often.
Not often. Not often. And it's consistent with the mission. So, we really got to make it stick. There's a couple things I think we're really excited about for 2026 that I think are super relevant. You talked about the complexity, just like using stablecoins still. It's not nearly as mature as some of us who have held stablecoins in DeFi use cases for a few years might think or might take for granted. And that's that complexity, the problem statements in that are exactly where Eco sits, for a number of reasons. One is, if you happen to be someone operating across chains holding different stablecoins, kind of like doesn't feel very useful. It feels like holding a wallet full of gift cards. I can use this one over here, but I can't use it over there, and I got to hold them all because I don't have really good liquidity and interoperability between them. That's a problem statement we kind of get at and we kind of address. Another one is that bridging is actually bridging, quote unquote, is actually pretty dumb, right? Like rarely often, or like rarely, not very often do I just like want to take my dollar and move it over there for the hell of it. I'm really trying to seamlessly compose that action with some other thing. And I think extending the bridging use case into just like, I'm just using my money cross-chain, making that seamless, enabling it to sort of program multiple steps that react in real time to market conditions is a lot of where this space is headed. So I think like one stablecoin meta for 2026 is going to be this whole programmability axis where a lot of our best tech is. So that's another reason why I'm very, very optimistic. We were kind of late to bridging, which is actually a benefit. We're maybe a year late to bridging by the time we built our current tech, and we're like, okay, well, we have a super high performance stablecoin bridge, so we can warm up some volume that way. But really, our best tech is like, why do you bridge? When and how and where and how and like why? Like, what is that tooling? And that's where I think we got ahead this year, and that's where I think will emerge in a pretty powerful way next year. So I'm optimistic for all of those reasons. A little paranoid. It's like, don't fumble the bag. If you've been in this space for a long time, your moments are fleeting, and if you feel like you're building the right thing at the right time, you'll make it stick. So we're working our asses off to make that true. But yeah, I feel really good.
Yeah, look, I think it goes without saying that it's not easy to build those tools, but there are a handful of people that have built them well. And it also goes without saying that you need to be able to bridge stablecoins to other chains. And if you've spoken to any of the brightest minds in the industry over the past few years, it's always been that kind of thing, like we need to solve interchain cross-chain interoperability. And I think we've gotten to that point that the infrastructure exists, but now it's about abstracting that complexity away. And, if you go and look at your website, it talks a lot about this one-click sort of, you know, stablecoin utility. And I think that that is also just a, you know, like Web3's kind of utopian dream of emulating the gold standard of Web2 experiences, which is like a 3-click process to do anything. You want to you want to open an account, it should be doable in 3 clicks. You want to buy something, it should be doable in 3 clicks. You know, that kind of user experience. You're trying to do that in even less steps than that.
Yeah.
Why do you want to do that, and how hard is it to do that?
Really hard in terms of why. I just think it's pretty obvious. Let's make this money as useful as possible. You know, it's programmable money. It should be easier to use than the old money. We're not even on parity yet, so we got to get to parity first, and then we can whittle away from there. Yeah, our website's actually not that helpful and somewhat intentional. It's sort of just like we'll talk more about the deeper tech next year. We'll put more up there, but right now just focus the message on that end state, because it's the end state that we think is required. Yeah, the tech is hard because the use cases are different. So, you know, like, why would you want to, like, there's a spectrum of like how and why you want to program money movement across chains using stablecoins. One example is you're an app builder and you want to fully stablecoin abstract people, not just chain abstract them, but stablecoin abstract them. That means they get a dollar balance regardless of what underlying basket of high integrity stablecoins they might be holding in a particular block and where they sit. So you want to give them a global balance and you want to make that accessible in one click to do anything else on chain. That's like the consumer product dream. You're just using your money. On the other end of the spectrum, you might have a very sophisticated capital allocator, a liquidity manager, an institutional type of use case, and they want the maximum amount of control. You know, they want the switchboard in front of them. Give me all the options with the right audit trail, the right data control, the right market responsiveness. Basically, the most powerful power tools I can possibly have for why I would move my money. And that makes sense, right? An institution's not going to have some guy in the back office mashing a bridge button. No. You know, those strategies are going to be increasingly automated. They need to be programmable through an API endpoint. And there's use cases in between. So the tech is pretty hard. You know, those are different tools for different use cases to sort of make chains disappear or not, and help money flow across those chains as appropriate for the particular use case. But that's where a lot of the opportunity is, I think. And there's some pragmatism in it. It's just like, just making money as useful as possible on chain, such that it flows without any greater complexity than my data flowing across multimodal data centers around the world, to talk to you guys right now, across some cables in between. And that's inevitable. It's a question of whether we can attain that in crypto in 18 months or whether it takes 5 years, and whether we rug ourselves as an industry or in macro sometime in between and slow that progress down. We'll see, but we are going to get there. That's just technical maturity. And then 10 years from now, we're going to be talking again, and we're going to be wistful and nostalgic for what it felt like today. But I think that, yeah, I think that's our opportunity, honestly. And so, with Eco, we have an underlying protocol that basically is really, really good at money movement, kind of just-in-time liquidity, good stablecoin routing. But where I think we butter our bread, so to speak, is the tools we stack on top of that protocol for different types of builders to access it and call to it and say, I need routing and liquidity for stablecoins on demand for this reason. And yeah, if we can basically abstract from there such that, if appropriate, their end users have a one-click experience to do anything they want to do on chain, and I think we've delivered on a programmable money promise that we've been waiting on for a long time.
Ryan, we've been speaking for 40 minutes and I still don't feel like I've got even halfway through what I wanted to ask. But I will combine several into one last question. It does feel like we're building at the right time. I think, the industry is well poised at the moment, particularly for stable coins. The US is a hotbed at the moment, which, 2 years ago felt like was never going to happen.
Yeah.
What are the tough points? What are the barriers right now to innovation? And the reason I ask this is kind of twofold. We're still seeing some butting of heads. Some of this is kind of theatrical, like the alleged Jack Mallers debanking. I don't even know if I need to say alleged anymore. It seems pretty clear. But So you got that sort of friction there, which it still seems like some of the banks and major financial institutions are a little bit uncomfortable with it because they're probably just losing ground. And then obviously you've got where Gareth and I are, Europe, the EU is kind of a nightmare for it. Tether just doesn't even care about getting the license, and Mika's caused all these different problems. And then we've got a central bank digital currency en route and all the perils that come with that. So really, you can see how many questions I've combined here. So what do you see as like the big fences right now that you need to vault? What are you concerned about? What's holding you back a little bit?
I'm gonna kind of make up an answer to that question. What will be holding us back? Right now, we're trying to keep up with the demand we have. So there's not a whole lot holding us back. We just got to meet it. That's very eco-specific, though. You know, it's like I got a couple chains I can move 200K order between, and someone's coming in my door every day saying, "Can you move 5 million?" And you know, I'm in one shot, right? Can that be our maximum? I'm like, so pretty clear what we need to accomplish, right? You know, I want that answer must be yes during Q1. So nothing's really holding us back at the moment, other than just like raw ability to have the velocity meet demand. A broader, like in terms of broader perspective, what you're really asking, yeah, there's going to be a fragmentation mess, and there's multiple. We're just going to keep stacking fragmentation categories on top of each other. Some of them are totally self-imposed, right? Like us as an industry deploying 200 stablecoins, you know, like that. Okay, and deploying way more chains than we probably need. And there's probably expansion and then consolidation kind of within that set of problems, but that problem already exists. The regulatory fragmentation problem we're also going to stack on top of that, which I think is part of what you're kind of portending with your question. And it's going to be really messy. It is just there's no way around it, but it's still new tech that's maturing, and so it's not really surprising. You know, every new fragmentation axis makes our life a little bit more painful, but deepens the problem statement that the eco particularly cares about. And so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for us. I think, though, that just to blow the answer up a little bit, crypto's always been interesting to me because of this notion of currency competition. And that's going to get pretty hot now. And that's going to be pretty interesting. I think we forget that money as technology is just like a very, very slow evolving, slow moving technology. Hasn't really evolved that much in the last 50 to 100 years. And then you kind of look at the history of civilization, and it's probably only like step function evolved 5 or 6 times. And so there's always been this like nerdy element for me with crypto of like, if this technology is inevitable, like, and that rubber band's going to snap eventually, crypto's going to show billions of people that they have money optionality that they never realized they have. And that's either incredibly optimistic and equitable, or it's really destabilizing. And a motivating factor for me working in this industry for a long time has been to try to like bend that outcome toward optimism, because it could kind of go both ways. And when you ask that question, I kind of think about like if we get into the sort of like pretty hot currency competition among different regulatory regimes for how this money moves, you know, some element of that, there's going to be a new front on the currency battle that's going to be pretty interesting to see. Now I'm answering a question you didn't ask. So this is all gratuitous at this point in time. You asked what's really holding us back, and I was like, I don't really know. We just got to find our way through it.
It's fine. What I'll do is I'll record myself asking the question, and we'll just cut it. We'll cut it into the edit. It's fine. One more thing to add there, I think, when it comes to the optimistic side for the user, I think that's kind of intuitive what that might look like. And we've had the conversations on the show before about just how few products and how few opportunities the average person has with their money. I mean, in the UK, most people, there's a tweet doing the rounds at the moment with some stats on the UK. Most people who have £10,000 saved have it in cash. They don't have it invested in anything. I think that was the stat, which, I mean, it does track with, you know, people I've spoken to, friends and family and stuff. There seems to be a reluctance to do anything with your cash, because also you're not taught that it's just eroding in purchasing power at lightning speed. So you don't really know anything. And one of the reasons this dates back to an episode we did in about South. Sorry, I know I've just seen Gareth's face like, sharp. We were rapping, and you've got a.
No, let's go.
Let's go.
A little. It's just a little detour. So we had an episode about stablecoin adoption in South America, and why it's just been this wonderful use case there, stabilizing use case. And one of the things that really caught my eye is that stablecoin yield has become fantastically interesting. For example, I get paid in stablecoins, and Coinbase will always offer, I think it's like 9.6% or something yield on my stablecoins if I just leave it in Coinbase. If I put that money basically anywhere else, including the stock market, the likelihood is I won't make that much. I mean, I know you get all these Instagram influencers that pretend they're millionaires and they're like, 10% every year compounding. Yeah, but 10% every year isn't actually that realistic. Most people can't do that just by putting it in a cash ISA or whatever. So I've always seen that side, that dynamic of stablecoins as being very interesting. And I think it could be revolutionary, and people will get more opportunities to actually make money from their money rather than just losing purchasing power. And so that's what I mean when I say the optimistic side is intuitive to me, at least for the user. You mentioned it could be destabilizing, and I think that is compelling. I can see how it could be destabilizing. Do you mean that could be destabilizing for the user as well? I guess by sheer effect, it would be. But what does that look like? Like, what does the destabilizing narrative actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. What do their economies do if they see a flight out of their currency into dollars because dollars are newly accessible? How do they try to stem that? What new capital controls do you see that didn't exist before? What bank protectionism do you see emerge, even more so than it already is entrenched in many regulatory regimes and societies? And one thing is, everything's moving faster in the world now. So like once that starts, it's a run. Once there's any shred of a network effect and the ability to get a dollar where your local currency is not desirable, it becomes a run. A viral sort of, let me download that and let me get that too. And it's really hard to stem that in real time. You know, I think maybe sort of your ability to do so is kind of somewhat intertwined with, I think, your ability to like turn the internet off and some civil liberty concerns. This is a little bit alarmist, but like, you know, that you're asking me to go toward like that kind of hypothetical end of the spectrum. What does the stabilization look like? It looks like run toward the dollar and away from other currencies much more quickly than sort of the home base for those currencies and the banks that manage those currencies could ever anticipate. That's one thing. And then, I don't know, can I take a step further?
Oh, please.
Hot take territory. You know, here we go. My comms team is going to love this. Like, what happens if the dollar breaks? What happens if we get beyond like currency competition, beyond fiat currencies, and you get into real competition, not between fiat currencies, but between the notion of fiat and crypto itself? And there's this like, there's the black swan that for stablecoins is the dollar breaking, which doesn't seem so far-fetched to us that have been in crypto for a long time, because a lot of early Bitcoiners would have ran to Bitcoin because they thought that might already happen by now. And you look at the US and we're not like a modicum of governance stability these days. And so, you know, that's the ultimately destabilizing. That's not just for crypto, right? Like that's for the world. But, you know, crypto provides an alternative to that version of the future. And if that version of the future starts to somehow unfold, then jury's out as to whether crypto becomes a haven that kind of is a stabilizing force, or has its own sort of gravity to accelerate that trend and is like an interim destabilizing force. And I've actually thought about that for, you know, 10 plus years now. Funny, we're in hot territory, but if you go toward like the furthest extreme of the destabilization into that spectrum, and you talk about different hypotheticals, that to me is one that is very concerning, and maybe inevitable on any time horizon, a couple hundred years from now, hopefully not during our lifetime, but um, it's an interesting one to kind of ruminate on. How do you react to that?
Yeah. Well, I'll jump into that one because I also think about this one quite a lot, and I've met Paolo Arduino from Tether quite a few times. I've had some really great sort of in-depth private conversations with him, and I can categorically say that he's a Bitcoiner through and through. He really cares about Bitcoin, and that's the core part of their mission.
Yep.
But a lot of Bitcoiners will sit there and say, well, you can say that very easily, but your company is literally helping the US retain the US dollar hegemony around the world. And it will for some time, because that's what stablecoins are giving us now, is an opportunity to be banked without having to jump through all the hoops of getting a bank account. I come from South Africa. I've lived in African countries growing up. There's lots of people that simply just can't go to the local bank and open a bank account because they don't have a physical address. They don't even have an ID document, all these things we take for granted. Introduce blockchain technology and stable coins and wallets, and suddenly, like, you can be anywhere, you can be anyone, as long as you have a mobile device that can connect to the internet. You can be banked, and stable coins are the best way to do it. And that is why Paolo told me in an interview earlier this year, he's like, I'm not going to adhere to MiCA because I don't believe in those regulations. If the banking system and government systems and the EU are telling me that in order for us to meet MiCA, I need to hold a load of money in local banks that don't want to bank me, and then they will operate a fractional reserve, then I am taking on the risk as the issuer by adhering to the rules. And if everyone comes back to me and says, hey, I want my dollars back for my Tether tokens, and I don't have them because the bank that I'm storing them in doesn't have the deposits because they're running a fractional reserve, everything crumbles, But at the same time, everyone wants stable coins because they're really easy to use. If I want to send money back to South Africa, I'm not going to do it through my Dutch bank account. I'm going to do it through stable coins because I can do it in 5 minutes and have money in my South African bank account. We've completely broken the rules. So I agree with you, Ryan. Like the problem here now is that we are helping the US dollar, continue, but more and more people are waking up to the fact that monetary policy and the way that fiat money works is inherently broken. And I don't think this perpetual debt cycle can continue forever. And when it breaks, stablecoins is part of the new infrastructure of the dollar, and that's going to break. And my only conclusion to that is, like, I hope you bought some Bitcoin, because when it comes to decentralized money, that's probably the best bet you have, having as many Satoshis to your name as possible. And then again, that's the other hurdle to this, is like, there's so many people that don't have Bitcoin. And we've already seen it. The European Central Bank put out a paper, I think it was like a year or two ago, where they finally kind of recognized that, like, Bitcoin is a threat, but it's unfair because all the early Bitcoin adopters had an unfair advantage. So how do we do equitable distribution of all the Bitcoin? Because they got an unfair advantage ahead of us by getting all the Bitcoin. And it's like, well, what about all the people that have, all the bankers and everything over the centuries that have collected all this wealth through all sorts of fairly illegitimate ways and just got ahead of everyone else? What is fair? But we all know that the money's kind of broken, and we're trying to fix it, but we've just given them the right rails to keep the fiat system going. But at what point does that end?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think there's an irony and a paradox that the fastest path to Bitcoin for people is stablecoins.
Yes, and that's what Paolo will tell you as well.
His position is perfectly consistent to me. It's like, if you want to lead the world to Bitcoin, you got to get money on chain, and stablecoins are the best way to get money on chain. And also, they're just a more immediate problem to solve. I think all of us, civilizationally, of course, someday there's going to be a post-dollar world. Let's just like hope it's beyond our kids and our grandkids' lifetime, and it's not a massive destabilizing moment that we experience or that they do. You're right. I think we can all, we can all maybe hope for that type of timeline. And anywhere in the near term, like the practical near to midterm, there's just this huge demand for people to get stable money with a good rate of return. and that's the dollar. And maybe the existence of stablecoins creating new currency competition is an optimistic thing. Maybe the projection of the dollar into further corners of the world is an optimistic thing, solving that more immediate problem for people's day-to-day lives. And then, oh, by the way, your money's also on chain now too. And so there's this whole universe of other possibilities that you can emerge to take advantage of or not for yourself in the years to come. And so, the trend is quite good. It's just the grave black swan is interesting to think about, and you hope it doesn't sort of like hit too soon. But it is an irony to me that it's like this race condition. Like get all the money into stablecoin. So there's the maximum amount of potential energy to get all the money, if needed, out of those currencies. Isn't that crazy?
That is very true. I never
if you
thought
really
about
like
it like
blow it
that.
Yeah.
Look,
Anyway,
Ryan, we could
stuff.
continue this conversation for a really long time, and I'm sure you've got a whole day ahead of you. Rob and I are wrapping up our day, but really, it's been a fascinating conversation. We'll be watching with keen interest to see what happens with Eco, and obviously with you. We consider you a friend of the show, so knock on our door anytime. We'd love to continue these philosophical conversations, and yeah, it's always good to chat to someone who's like-minded and thinks very deeply about the industry, as Rob and I often do. Sometimes these shows can go on for a bit long because we enjoy our conversations a little bit too much. But again, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to find out more about Eco, go and check out their X account at Eco. You can also find Ryan on X. It's at Ryan Saxe. That's S-A-X-E. Yeah, you go do your homework and go and check them out. Ryan, thanks again for joining us. Thank you again for joining us and watching another episode of Chain Reaction. We are here every day, 4 p.m. Central European Time, 10 a.m. Eastern if you're in the United States. Join us again tomorrow for another show. And again, if you're in the UAE, Abu Dhabi, go and check out CoinTelegraph's Longitude event. It's a fantastic panel of speakers. Kieran Lyons will be stepping in for me while I'm not available, and he's going to do a fantastic job moderating. So go ahead, sign up. You can find the Luma link on CoinTelegraph's X account or my X account, Gaza_Jenks. Check that out. Like, retweet the space, follow CoinTelegraph, follow Ryan, follow Robert. Do whatever else you need to do. Until tomorrow, have a fantastic evening, and bye-bye.